for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right, good evening. Fade to Black. Today is Tuesday, May 9th. I am your host, Jimmy Church, and our guest tonight is Dr. Ken Jeremiah. And tonight's broadcast is brought to you by Accidental Truth. It is the new hit documentary, now streaming on all platforms. The links for it are below, directed by Ron James. This is the documentary that is a must-view for everybody in our community. So go and check it out. Again, the links are below, and I say it every time. My 8 seconds in this film, it makes the entire film. 8 seconds. But they're 8 good seconds. Check out Accidental Truth today. Our guest tonight is Dr. Ken Jeremiah, and we are going to be discussing his research. He's written about mummification and some other things over the years, but all of this has led him to the Spear of Destiny. He has written more than 12 books about mummification and other historical phenomena, including Zen Art, Zen Writing, Living Buddhas, Christian Mummification, Eternal Remains, Remnants of a Distant Past, Creatures Real and Imaginary, in Chinese and Japanese art, and Chadogu, The Art of Tea and Making Millions, a 500-year-old Kabbalist guide to conquering chance. He has appeared on numerous podcasts and television interviews, including History Channel's Ancient Aliens and the UnXplained with William Shatner. His link, kenjeremiah.com, is below. We have it over on our website and throughout social media. And I want to get straight to it tonight. I'm going to say welcome, Dr. Ken Jeremiah, for the first time to Fade to Black. Welcome, man. How you doing?
Not bad, Jimmy. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you, and you get the first-time guest disclaimer. And is this the first time you've been on Fade to Black?
On your show, yes.
Yeah, wow. I thought that you were on before, and I went and looked at a lot of shows, right? and I'm getting old. So you get the first-time guest disclaimer tonight, Ken, which is it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends, and where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, but we're going to end as friends.
All right, sounds good.
Okay. You accept.
I accept the rules.
All right.
I accept the consequences, I guess, too. Right?
Tonight is going to be one of those shows. I think both you and I know that we know what's about to happen on the broadcast, and I'm very excited about this. But I have to let's back up for a second, because I'm a little confused about the road traveled from mummification, of which you're an expert, to the Spear of Destiny. So we kind of got to start there. But I want to start off with this. I just got back from Egypt, and the mummies, right? And but one of the things that I did on this last trip, and I'm going back again in a couple of months, but I went to the new, not the new Grand Museum. That's still not finished. But I went to the other new museum there, and it's the Museum of Culture and History of Egypt. And that is where they now have the pharaohs and the families. And you may remember this when they had the big parade through Cairo, and the fireworks and the ceremony of them, taking And it's a very spiritual thing. You know, this is a very special thing for Egypt. But they brought all of the mummies down and then put them in this new museum, and I was able to go there. And here's my takeaway. It is pretty mind-blowing to go up to Ramses, first, second, third, fourth, fifth. I don't know. They have 15 of them there, I think, right? Each one up close, right? Where you can you're not allowed to photograph. You're not allowed to talk down there. It's very it's a sanctuary, and you have to respect that. But to go up close and look, it's like they died yesterday. I don't know how to explain it. There's a strange feeling that comes over you because they are in such great condition, considering, you know, thousands of years have passed. And what got your interest into mummification? Was it Boris Karloff? Was it the mummy?
No, it actually had nothing to do with Egypt at all. I used to run tour groups through Japan, and I've translated a whole bunch of Hiroshima survivor testimonies, but I used to bring people through Tokyo, Kyoto, and Hiroshima. And 1 year after my job had ended, I decided to go up to northern Japan and explore. And I was talking to an older gentleman on a train from Sapporo to Asahikawa. That's in Hokkaido, Japan's northernmost island. And we're speaking in Japanese, and I explained to him that I'm looking for unusual phenomena that I haven't seen before in Japan. So he asked me if I had seen the Soka Shimbutsu, and I didn't know what that word meant. So I asked him to explain it, and I thought I was misunderstanding him because he was talking about people who mummified themselves while they were still alive. And it made no sense at all to me, but that's what he was actually saying. And he said they were all located in the Yamagata prefecture. So I literally got out of the train, got something to eat, jumped right back on another train and went back to Yamagata prefecture. In that first year, I met, well, they say met in Japanese. They'll say, Soka Shimbutsu ni atta, have you met the Soka Shimbutsu, the living Buddhas, the men who mummified themselves while they were still alive? And there are maybe 5 on display. So what I did, I did a ton of research on that. I translated 2 books from Japanese, one from French and one from Italian, put it all together in my book, Living Buddhas, and then continued doing television shows, podcasts, and that type of thing about the phenomenon.
Can I stop you right there, Ken, for a second?
Sure, of course.
I'm sure that everybody is a little dumbfounded, with that kind of statement.
Sure.
Mummification while you are still alive.
Yes.
Okay, well, obviously still alive. 2, mummification. Is it exactly what you are saying?
Yes, and I'll explain it if you'd like.
Yes, please.
So almost everyone who did this was a member of the Shingon sect of Buddhism, and that was founded by Kobo Daishi, who supposedly sealed himself in a cave, and his hair and fingernails continued to grow after his death. But of course, when you're dealing with mummies and the dead, that type of phenomenon seems to happen, and people just misinterpret it. What happens is the skin gets dry and pulls away, exposing more hair and exposing more fingernails. So when you see that in old texts, it's nothing miraculous or anything like that. But these individuals were following Kobo Daishi, and they were also members of a sect called Shugendo. And after the Meiji Restoration, the government ordered all religions to fall under the banner of Shinto or Buddhism. And basically, Shugendo picked Shingon Buddhism and became kind of one with that. The individuals who engaged in this process of self-mummification gradually cut out the amount of food they ate. So they call it mokujiki-gyo. And mokujiki-gyo literally translates to tree eating, because when they cut out grains, they substituted the grains with pine bark, pine resin, and pine needles. So they continued eating these things that are preservative in nature, trying to literally preserve the body from the inside out. In 2 cases, there's a lot of false information out there, and in some cases it's really strange because my book on the subject is the only book in English. So people who are getting it from an English language book, it's coming from my book, and they're just misquoting it. I've heard before on television shows where people are saying that every one of them drank lacquer. That did not happen. And if you're drinking straight lacquer, you'll die immediately. It's not like a maybe. You will die immediately.
Right.
So with two of them, what happened was they had urushi, which comes from a tree, and it's poisonous. It's highly poisonous, but it was in the water supply. So they were drinking it, but it was a small amount. It's like if you go to New Mexico, you can go to certain spas where they have arsenic water, and you drink arsenic water and you're in it. But of course, pure arsenic will just kill you. It's really minute amounts. But in two of the cases, yes, they did have urushi, which is a type of lacquer, and that also helped to preserve the body. So what they would do, the reasons behind it are complex, and I can get into that later if you want. But basically, as time progressed, they gradually cut out all foods, and they only had pine bark, pine needles, pine resin. So they're starving themselves to death. And then at the point they think that they're nearing death, they bury themselves alive in an underground coffin. And their followers would seal the top of the tomb and put a bamboo breathing tube in place. And in the tomb, they had their mala, which are like rosary beads, and a bell. And they would meditate ringing that bell. And the followers would wait outside the coffin, outside the tomb, until they heard that bell stop ringing. And once it stopped ringing, they just assumed that the individual had died. So they pulled the breathing tube out, buried the coffin, and they left it there for 3 years. When they pulled the bodies back out after 3 years, and 3 is significant in most world religions, especially Buddhism, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the 4 noble truths, but you have the three paths. Basically, you need to follow the 4 noble truths, which is through the noble eightfold path and that kind of stuff. But once they dug the bodies up, if the bodies had been preserved, they were thought to be like saints, the Christian equivalent of saints. And they were cleaned, redressed, and put in a special temple hall called Sokobutsudo. If for some reason the body didn't mummify, they performed an exorcism and simply reburied the body.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole idea of self-mummification, and they're known as Sokushimbutsu, or living Buddhas.
So you eat wood, basically.
And pine bark and pine resin.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Yes,
I've never heard this.
Yeah.
And I love learning something for the first time. Okay, so let's continue on this journey here.
So that, if you want, led me to Christian mummification. Because the whole idea behind the Buddhist self-mummification was they performed austerities throughout their lives. And they thought that the body possessed an inherent power that could be useful for human beings. So there are many stories, especially this one individual called Tetsumonkai, who traveled around the countryside performing miracles. And he'd witnessed an outbreak of an eye illness in Tokyo, and it was called Edo at the time, but he sees an outbreak of an eye illness and prays for a cure, and people who came around him were actually cured. So they were thought to have these miraculous powers, and they were inherent within the body itself. But if they simply got rid of the body, if they burned the body as was the typical custom, then all the powers that are in the body are gone. And of course, they wanted to go to the Tushita heaven. They wanted to train under the future Buddha, Maitreya, Miroku in Japanese, who would eventually come and help human beings at their greatest time of need, which is happening, don't worry anyone, it's happening millions of years from now. But they wanted to train at the Tushita heaven with him. So they had to direct their own deaths. So that's why they buried themselves alive in meditative posture. But the whole idea that there's some sort of an inherent power in the body, you see it in a lot of religions where here in Hawaii, we call it mana, but you have in Indian religions, prana, ki in Japanese, chi in Chinese, a whole bunch of others throughout religions in the world. If there's some sort of a power that's inherent in the body, you need the body preserved. And what I started noticing was in Catholic and Orthodox Christianity, the exact same thing happens. They have actual bodies mummified on display throughout Europe. And before they were behind glass, people would go up to those bodies and want to make physical contact with them. And I remember going to a church years ago in Canada, and I forgot the name of it, a big cathedral, but on the way out, you see all sorts of crutches and canes and that type of thing, where people who had entered the church to pray in front of the bone of a saint came out being able to walk again, where previously they had impediments to that. So the whole idea that there's this power inherent in the body is also in Christianity. So what I decided to do was look into the history of Christianity, because those bodies are everywhere throughout Europe. The ones that look like they're still rosy red, they were mummified with an arsenic-based solution. And there are a whole bunch of other different solutions. Every single church member is always mummified. And even today, when you go to a wake, that body has been mummified. It has formaldehyde for the most part in it, because if not, those bodies would be decaying in front of people. It would be a disgusting sight, a disgusting display, instead of something that might be, in a sense, beautiful, but it at least gives people an opportunity to say their goodbyes. It's a spiritual tradition. Mm-hmm. So that led me to Christianity, and eventually you can see how now it led me to Nazism, Heinrich Himmler, Adolf Hitler, and their connection with the Roman Catholic Church and the Red Cross, and then to the Spear of Destiny, obviously. So it's a long trip, but it it took me here.
Wow. If we that's a great segue, actually. If we go back throughout history and you look at Helen, you look at Charlemagne, you look at the Knights Templar, and others, everybody was heading to Jerusalem to get biblical relics of some kind. Whether it was, their search was for the Ark of the Covenant, the true cross, the Spear of Destiny, the Holy Grail. The list is extremely long here. This has been going on for a very long time, hasn't it?
Yes, it has, for as long as I can figure out. Because even before Christian mummification started, and even before the Buddhist mummification started, even before the Egyptians started, the earliest known mummies are in South America, off the Atacama coast in Chile and Peru, and they were the Chinchorro mummies. And the Chinchorros had two different types of mummification. There was the red style and the black style. Red style made use of red ochre, and the black style was black manganese oxide, which was they treated the masks and the rest of the body. But basically, a lot of the mummies that were found were children, which tells us that they were grieving parents and wanted the mummies of their children to remain with them. And they actually displayed them in homes and even touched them up as time went on. But what they would do, as disgusting as it might seem in modern times and in the United States and Europe and wherever people are watching this, what they used to do is take the skin off, flip it inside out, and then get rid of all the internal organs and restuff the body with things like twigs and anything else they could find, grasses, twigs, just to prop the body up itself. Then they'd reapply the skin and then put a wooden mask over the face, or a clay mask in a couple cases, I believe. And then they would treat the body with either red ochre or black manganese oxide. And if you looked at these and you didn't know they were human beings, they look like kind of scary looking dolls. You might not even know that they're actually mummies. Right. But if anyone wants to just type in Chinchorro and look for pictures alone, you'll see tons of examples of them.
Now, I don't want to go sideways, but you just reminded me of something. So just very briefly, 4 or 5 years ago, the Nazca mummies appeared, caused quite a bit of, they went viral, literally, and, found in Peru, and 3 fingers long, covered in white powder, quite a few, but the big one was quite amazing looking. What did you make of those? Do you think they were authentic?
I don't know. I really don't know. Some of them definitely look like they're real, but you can tell the difference too. So some of the Nazca mummies are blatantly real human beings, and I don't know why they did this, but in some cases, the people who care for the mummies today have put wigs on them. So last time I was in Peru, I saw two of them in a museum, a really small museum actually, but they had these wigs that were strangely out of place. You see other ones though that they look like white casts, and they show three-fingered Peruvian mummies. And those things, I don't believe are even mummies. I don't think there are human beings in there. And it's like, if anyone's been to Pompeii, anyone who's watching this, if you go to Pompeii, all the so-called bodies that you're looking at aren't bodies at all. What those are, when the lava flow came and killed people, when it hit the bodies have gases in them and that kind of thing. As the lava was cooling and the bodies were literally destroyed, the gases left a pocket. So people came in and made plaster casts of the pockets. So what you're seeing are casts of bodies and not actual human bodies. If you take a look at those Peruvian mummies, the Nazca mummies, some of them you can look at and say these are blatantly human beings, and they're in a poor state of preservation too. Some of them, do have flesh still on the bones, but others are mostly just bone. That doesn't mean they're not mummies. They're still mummies. But when you look at the white ones and you see, like, online, you see things like three-fingered Peruvian mummies and that kind of thing. If this is actually just a cast, and just from my experience, it looks like it's a cast of a body, you could just take two fingers off and shave off the edge so it looks like nothing was gone. You could modify those bodies. And
Yeah,
it's kind of,
I looked at the MRIs and the X-rays of the bones in the hands, and that's what I found very interesting. Is there was definitely just three bones going back to the wrist. It didn't look like anything was cut away or funky on the pinky, and also the joints of the fingers, because the fingers were like a foot long. It was just very strange to me. I'm not an expert at all in this.
Are these the ones that look white from the outside?
Yeah, they had
They look like plaster cast.
Yeah, white powder on the outside.
Right.
But
In that case, I didn't realize that that there were MRIs that showed bones.
they MRI'd them and X-rayed them, and they also took tissue samples.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. So this is just very strange. Okay, so
Yeah.
So how did again, I was talking about Helen and Charlemagne and the Knights Templar and every the pilgrimage going to Jerusalem looking for biblical artifacts from the time of Jesus and before, of course, as well. And then Hitler, he went around the world, man. He was looking for everything everywhere. We've all seen Indiana Jones, right? Which actually lays it out pretty well. But Hitler was going to the Himalayas, right? I mean, he was all over the place looking for these spiritual artifacts that may help him and the Reich take over the world. What led you ultimately to the Spear of Destiny?
It did have its background in religion, but just to clarify too, before World War II, we're dealing in 1930s, and Hitler was a big fan of Elena Blavatsky, founder of Theosophy. He and Himmler especially were big fans of the spiritualism movement that was in full effect at that point. And they were recovering from the end of the Second Reich, which we'll get into later. And this is before they actually started the Third Reich. It was just beginning. It was primarily Himmler who was the one looking for spiritual artifacts. But both Himmler and Hitler before the war were into occult practices, and they were looking into everything. And Blavatsky had some strange things going on as far as hiring mediums to contact the spiritual world and that kind of thing. And Hitler and Himmler did the same thing. Once World War II began, though, Hitler actually told Himmler to stop doing that stuff, and he just continued. He had a team of people going into Tibet to find Shambhala, and he was looking for spiritual artifacts everywhere, and he was obsessed with the Holy Roman Empire treasures. Actually, most Germans were, because they believed it was theirs. And whether people have looked into this history or not, for years it was in Nuremberg. That's where it really belongs, from their opinion. And they had it moved to Vienna and Austria one story goes it's to get it out of Napoleon's grasp because Napoleon had his sights on it. But they had a fair, and it was on loan to Vienna, and they just never returned it after that. So it ended up being in safekeeping away from Napoleon, but it stayed there again just because of that fair that they had.
Now, I have heard a few different things over the years, and the Spear of Destiny especially is one of those things, just like the True Cross or pieces of the True Cross, right? Mm-hmm. Very hard to get a chain of custody and be able to follow it back. Same thing, how many Holy Grails are there on this planet right now? 100? Of different shapes and sizes and materials. And the Spear of Destiny is kind of like that too. I mean, all the way to, I had heard a rumor, and there was a few claims. You can laugh at any point if you want. But I had heard a rumor that the United States got the Spear of Destiny, brought it back here because they wanted to keep it safe, and they were the ones that returned it to Vienna. But the one that they returned to Vienna was a copy, and the real one is still here in the United States. I mean, stories like that. Is there any reality to this?
So, well, I'm going to get into the specifics regarding the Spear of Destiny and all the copies and that kind of thing in much more detail later. But there are some people out there in the United States who know a bit more than I do about this subject. And I broached that once. I said, do you think it's possible that the one in Vienna is not the oldest lance? That the real one was taken by the US and switched? And they said, this is one individual in particular I'm thinking of. He's 86 years old, extremely intelligent on this subject. And he sparked my interest even more than I already had regarding the Spear of Destiny, the lance that stabbed the side of Jesus. But he said, no, that didn't happen at all. And then I started reading a whole bunch of books because I'm working on a book on the Spear of Destiny. I'm about 240 pages deep right now. But I started reading some books by Kenneth Alford, and I have one in front of me. And he wrote a whole bunch of books about how U.S. soldiers were stealing Nazi artifacts and even Jewish artifacts that the Nazis had stolen and bringing them back to the United States. So in the United States during World War II, there were a whole bunch of people, especially in the art world, that supported the Nazis. And a lot of the money, or at least some of the money, I should say, that the Nazis needed actually came from the United States. Individuals within the United States, not the government, but individuals, especially within the art world, and some really big names. And there are tons of books on the subject, and I recommend Ken Alford's books. He wrote about 3 of them. But in 2 of the books he wrote, I noticed something a little bit weird. And it had to do with him mentioning that there was a copy of the Holy Roman Empire treasures that were actually in the Fort Benning Museum in Georgia. And I called Fort Benning. He said, I'm working on my own book. I'd like to come down and see the copies. Because I talked to my older friend, and he's like, that doesn't make any sense. We know who created Himmler's lance. We know who made the Aachen copy. The Viennese lance, we have a good idea of when and where it was made, the actual person who put it together, a different story, and I'll get into that later. But he said, there's no way this happened. So I called Ken Alford, and I said, I read 3 of your books. You mentioned this. Fort Benning, when I called them, said, we don't have anything like that. I said, all right, it's not on display. I have the Ascension numbers. It's downstairs. Can you go check on it for me? And they said, no, we don't have to check. There's no Ascension number like that. It doesn't exist. So I called Ken Alford and I said, they're telling me this never existed here. You have it in 3 of your books. Can you explain this? And at first, no offense to him, I didn't know him at the time. I thought maybe he embellished his books. Like when I'm reading something, I'm really skeptical until I can, 3 other sources, basically I'm looking for information on. And if you're dealing with something like this, I want to see the actual objects.
Right.
The museum's saying they didn't have it. So Ken Alford sent me all the documentation that he actually used in the book. And let me see if I can blow this up just so I can read it carefully. It says, this is from the Office of the Provost Marshal General of the United States Army, Washington, D.C. It says, subject, investigation of alleged grand larceny regarding Lieutenant Colonel Joseph W. Hensel. And he has in this, and it's a huge document that he sent me. This is his actual unclassified military documents and documents from the museum itself, which include, under this, it says exhibits A, B, C, and D, and it has descriptions of the objects that are at Fort Benning Museum. And Fort Benning is saying they have no knowledge of this. I sent that to them, and they said, you're going to have to speak to someone who was in charge, but it was like someone high up, high ranking in the Army. And they told me they wouldn't give me any information, that it didn't exist, and what I had wasn't real. They wouldn't even talk to me about it. And I called Ken Alford again, and I said, this is what just happened. And he said the last time he was down there talking about it, they actually pulled a gun on him and said that they escorted him out, and then they called him a neo-Nazi outside.
Now, you just said descriptions A, B, C, and D. What were in those descriptions?
Let me see if I can get to it.
I mean, I'm assuming that one of those is the Spear of Destiny.
All right, so here we got right here. As this goes through, and it is a ton of it. So just to give you an example here, and I don't have the photographs, but it starts with the photographs attached to this basic communication were compared with the originals, and it was established beyond possibility of a doubt that the photograph represent pictures of crude replicas of the crown, scepter, and the imperial apple. Now, keep in mind, the U.S. government told me this doesn't exist, and
right.
this is declassified information from them. It says photographs of the original and authentic crown, scepter, and imperial apple are attached, when I don't have those pictures, and these photographs were compared by Lieutenant Colonel Edwin Kretzmann with the authentic articles and are hereby certified to be photographs of originals. The chief points of difference, which are readily seen from the photographs, are the following, and this is where we get into the A, B, C, and D. A, in the crown, the enamel panels, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but just a general idea. The enamel panels representing various historic figures in the original have been replaced by panels depicting a crude imperial eagle. The size, shape, and setting of the stones are quite different in the two versions, and it continues. Then B, the differences between the original of the imperial apple and the imitation are immediately obvious. C, the differences between the original scepter are chiefly discernible in the base of the scepter, in which the imitation comes to a triangular point, while the genuine scepter is delicately formed with a slight rise in the middle, and that continues from there. And it then goes on to number 4 and more stuff here, and it says, all for the commanding general, Howard Judson, and we have a receive date there, and I can't read this receive date. It says 11 December 1945.
Wow.
So the thing is, they're saying this doesn't exist. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that it's a copy of the Holy Roman Empire treasures. But the one in Vienna are the Holy Roman Empire treasures. They're the real ones. There was a copy in Aachen. There was another copy of one of the items in Rome. And then you had rumors that there was a copy made by General Patton, who was also obsessed with the spear. But I haven't been able to find anything to substantiate that. There are some soldiers that claim that he was carrying around a spear that looked just like the one in Vienna after the one in Vienna was put into safekeeping. So if there was another one, maybe he had a copy of it made, just like Himmler had a copy of it made. And we'll get into that in more detail after. But the one in Georgia, it doesn't matter if it's a copy or not. We don't know who would have made it. And to me, it's obvious now that it did exist at that museum. And for whatever reason, it's gone. So it was stolen once, perhaps. Maybe it was made here in the United States. But maybe someone stole it again. because even the copies are worth a fortune.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And the okay, can I pull up this first image so
Sure.
everybody can kind of understand a little bit about what we're talking, because this starts to get pretty complex, but this is also a very, very fun and interesting subject to get into. And I think all of us have a general interest in the spear of destiny, which is the spear that pierced the body of Christ when he was on the cross. Now, before I bring up this image, I wanted your comment on one thing, because everybody will be able to see exactly what I'm bringing up right now when you see this. In the images of the spear of destiny that are out there, including the one in Vienna, that the outside that looks like a knife and a knife blade is not the spear. That is a protective ornamental thing that's on the outside of the actual spear, which is like a nail. I don't have a better way to explain.
If you don't mind, instead of pulling that image up first, how about just the image of a real first century Roman lance? And I sent it to you earlier.
Okay, which is, I believe you're talking about this.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So what's going to happen next for those of you watching or listening to this, and I hope you're watching it, because these images, you're going to see something on the show that you won't be able to find a picture of anywhere. And this show is honestly the first time it's ever going to be shown publicly.
I hope you have a security team in place, by the way.
It's gone. It's gone.
Okay.
It's not where you would ever think it is right now.
Let's not get ahead of our skis.
Yes. All right.
Because so this is radio. We have to do a build up.
So, it's difficult sometimes. I don't mean to interrupt this whole presentation, but it's difficult sometimes because I've spent the last 5 years doing research on this for the book. I mean, I've read thousands of pages of stuff. I've spoken to so many people, and I have so many historical artifacts that have to do with this. So this is a Roman lance that I purchased years ago. This is a first century Roman lance, and that's what it looks like. And this one is extremely well preserved, and it's been treated, so you don't have to worry about human oil. A lot of time with blades, you have to really worry about human oil because it destroys it. We actually had this thing treated, so you can handle it without gloves or anything like that. But before this thing comes up, just note that's what a real first century Roman lance looks like.
And that's what we always picture, a lance or a spear tip, to look like.
Right.
Okay.
And obviously there would have been a wooden staff, attached to this.
Yeah.
Shut this thing. If I can shut this. Sorry. Had to shut that window.
Oh, okay.
It's raining over here.
That's fine. That's fine. And yeah, everybody, you can see, I have to adjust my camera just a little bit. I'm slouching. You can see my mouse down here at the bottom. That's obviously where the shaft is inserted into the tip of the spear. Now, this is first century.
Yes, that's what a first century Roman lance looks like. And you got to remember too, as we start doing the real presentation of the Spear of Destiny, Heinrich Himmler and Adolf Hitler, they might have been evil, but they were not stupid people. There's no way they looked at what you're going to see next and thought it was a first century Roman lance, but they still wanted it, and they wanted it for a real reason, and it's way more important than a first century Roman lance. The images you're going to see, though, so before explaining any of this, the one in the middle is the so-called lance that you would find in Vienna today. You can go to the Schatzkammer at the Hofburg Museum in Vienna, Austria, and you can see this. It's on display. The one on the left is a copy made, and I believe, I'd have to check, but I think it was 400 years later in commemoration of the one in Vienna made in Aachen, but it might have been made way after that. I just don't remember offhand. The one on the right is the one that there are no pictures of anywhere. This is the first time it's ever being shown publicly. And I honestly, to tell you the truth, debated even showing this. But I'm one of those people that think it's not okay to hide historical events, that the truth is definitely necessary no matter what. And what you're going to hear tonight, and this is proof of it right here, the thing on the right, it's going to shatter what's in history textbooks. It's going to rewrite portions of World War II. What you'll hear about and what you'll read about didn't happen when it comes to the lance itself. And you'll hear that. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, so since we are here and we know that this is the one in the middle is the one that's in the museum in Vienna, I'm going to explain, well, and so are you, of course, what actually we are looking at. The one on the left is a copy, and then the one on the right, let's just go ahead and put it out there. You took this photograph,
Yes,
and you have this in your possession.
yes. It's not in Hawaii with me. It's in a safe deposit box.
Yes. But this one is yours. So we'll get into that too as well. Everybody brace yourself.
This is going to be huge.
Yeah, for what we have just revealed to you. Okay. Now, what I had said earlier was, and we showed you the first century Roman spear tip. This is the one that's in Vienna, and that's the spear right there. This is a protection that is around the outside of it. It is wrapped. And then this is a gold sheath for decoration that was wrapped around it. You can see the bottom here. That's the bottom of the spear tip. So when I described it as shaped like a nail.
Oh no! Can I explain this a little bit more fully, if you don't mind?
Yeah. Well, what I'm trying. Yes, absolutely.
Just that one. Okay. So, yeah. All right. So if you look at this, that spear was split in half, and it was split in half because accidentally, but they split it in half because they wanted to insert something that looked like a nail to represent one of the nails from the cross. So the thing you're looking at that looks like a nail, that's not what a first century Roman nail would have looked like. That was manufactured to basically take the place of a nail. But so the sheath in the center, there are actually 3 sheaths there. And the reason the sheaths are there are to hold the lance in place because it was accidentally broken in 2 when they were inserting that nail. If you take those things off the top, the wire off the top, you can slide those off the top of the lance. Then you get to this golden sheath. If you slide that off, you'll find a silver sheath that has inscriptions on both sides of it. If you slide the silver one off, you end up having an iron sheath. And when you slide that one off, you can pull the nail out. And when you pull the nail out, there are bits of metal. And those bits of metal are thought to be the bits from the real first century Roman lance that pierced the side of Jesus. This is just a container.
And which is what, yes. And thank you for that. Because when you look at, when everybody sees the spear of destiny, which was one of the points that you just made here that I think is very important, is that when you see this visually, you think you're seeing something else. But no, it's not. This is wrapped. I think this is silver wire, if I'm correct, right? Isn't that silver wire they use to hold everything in place? And
I think it's iron, but I could be wrong.
Okay. And then we have the same thing here. All right. A reproduction. And then we have yours, which looks like this. Now, also, we have what was I going to say? We have a deconstruction as well that will be coming up that everybody can see. And so when you compare that to this, now you understand when you see the spear of destiny and what we're talking about tonight, talking about this, we are not talking about this. And it is a very important point. Let's this right here is about as interesting as it gets. Well, no, this whole show is about as interesting as it gets. But what are we looking at here, Ken?
So the copy, the thing that I said you wouldn't be able to find a picture of anywhere, that belonged to Heinrich Himmler. And Heinrich Himmler, if anyone doesn't know, was for a time Adolf Hitler's number one guy and the man responsible for beginning the SS, which started as Hitler's personal guard and then kind of expanded from there. And they had their own religion. It was a Nazism religion, basically, but they had their own marriage ceremonies. They had their own rules. They had their own spiritual ceremonies, as weird as that might sound to some people because of the evil things they did. But they had their own spiritual beliefs, and they were Christian-based, even though they morphed it into something completely different and did evil things with it. And they even targeted the Jews in one sense. It gets way more complicated, but in one sense, because the Jews were responsible for killing Jesus. And that was one of the excuses they used for all this. But here's where it gets interesting insofar as the Spear of Destiny goes. And actually, if you think of it this way too, if he didn't care at all about Christianity, why was he so obsessed with Christian relics? He wanted Christian relics because he thought they had power within them. But here's where it gets really interesting with Heinrich Himmler. If you start reading books about the Spear of Destiny and the Nazi annexation of Austria, what we call the UnXplained, Heinrich Himmler was the one who took possession of this lance and the rest of the Holy Roman Empire treasures. Hitler wasn't there that day, and all the history textbooks say that Hitler was the one there. But we have documents that he signed that same day in Munich. He wasn't there. Heinrich Himmler was, and Heinrich Himmler delayed the invasion by 3 days for security arrangements, and that's how it's worded in one of the documents that he signed. He was the one who took possession of this. But the interesting thing is, you already saw a copy of this, not of the one in Vienna. So you saw a copy of the one in Vienna, the one that's in Aachen, and that was aged. So it looks like it's just as old as the one in Vienna.
Okay, let's back up. This is Aachen, the one on the left. This is Vienna in the middle, and this is the one on the right is yours.
Yes, the one on the right belonged to Heinrich Himmler, and then Adolf Hitler, and then Heinrich Himmler took possession of it again. So, I'm saying this wrong. The one in the middle, the one in Vienna, belonged to Heinrich Himmler, then Adolf Hitler, and then Heinrich Himmler took possession of it, but only for like a month. But before I get into that, the one on the right is Heinrich Himmler's copy, and he didn't have it aged, which means he didn't care if people thought that it was the one in Vienna. So the theory that he switched his copy with the one in Vienna doesn't make any sense. Now that people are seeing this for the first time, this is, anyone watching this, this is the first time this is ever shown in public. This lance is going to rip apart some of the history stories, some of the history textbooks already, because the conspiracy theorists that say Heinrich Himmler replaced it and it's not the right one, there's no way that happened, because that is his lance. It's not aged. He had this made, though. This is where things get really interesting and a little bit complex. He had this made 5 years before the annexation. So 5 years before, this was already in the plan that they were going to annex Austria and they were going to take possession of the Holy Roman Empire treasures. And what Heinrich Himmler did, now think of this, he's obsessed with the Holy Roman Empire treasures, but especially the lance. Why else would he have one made 5 years before this actually happened? What did he do when he had possession of the one in Vienna for a month before he put it with the rest of the Nazi stash? He took the bits of metal from the one in Vienna and he transferred it to his own lance. There's a legend that whoever possesses the actual spear that touched the side of Jesus, that had Jesus's blood on it, could control the destiny of the world. And my personal belief is Heinrich Himmler believed that. He truly believed that. He had some sort of a King Arthur fantasy going with the castle that he moved the SS into. He was collecting all of these religious artifacts from all over the world, not just Christianity, but he was obsessed with Christianity. He was especially obsessed with the Spear of Destiny, but he gave it back. He could have kept that one on his desk, but he didn't.
Right. He takes it apart, right? He unwraps it. He takes out the metal from the original lance, removes that. Maybe he replaced it with other bits of metal, but anyway, he wraps it back up and gives it back to the museum. And he has this new one made, which is here. Now, at the top of this is the display box. But up here at the top, you can see the HH right here. He's got a little spear tip, if you want to call it, right?
And that comes off. So
right.
That thing comes off. And the only thing that's there for, if you pull it off, even though, it's just a container for bits of metal from what he thought was the actual lance that pierced Jesus, it actually has a very sharp tip. So you could actually pierce yourself on it, and that thing just covers it up.
So now, as we look at this one really closely, and you have this, what appears to be writing here, and the way that the gold sheath is, one of the notes that I think all of us visually can make is how neatly the wire wrap is done here versus what we are looking at with the one in Vienna, and of course the knockoff that's here, and then yours, which is Heinrich Himmler's. And then we have, what does this say, and what language is this going down the middle?
So what you're seeing is actually what's coming through from the other side. I'm going to give it to you. It's in Latin. So we're dealing with the one in Austria, but Heinrich Himmler's lance was made obviously to resemble it in size and shape and everything about it. So the one in Austria, which means it's also Heinrich Himmler's lance and the Aachen copy, is 50.5 centimeters long. And it has 3 sleeves. The first one is iron. The second one with inscriptions is silver. And it says, Henricus digra tertius, Romano imperator hoc argentum, and then there's a number there. And then it says on the silver, on one side, that's what it says. On the second side, it says Sanctus Mauritius. And then it says Fabricari ad conversiones clavi ni et lance sancti Maurici. And the Sensus clavis Dominicus. This translated, now when I translate this at first, it might not make sense. It's only because they left out one word. It says Heinrich, by the grace of God, for the 3rd Roman emperor, builder of the empire, caused this silver to be made for the attachment of the nail of our Lord and the lance of the holy Saint Mauritius. Now Heinrich, now this is interesting too. This refers to Heinrich, which is Henry the Fowler, who lived from 876 to 936. Heinrich Himmler thought he was the reincarnation of that individual.
Fascinating, man. Absolutely fascinating. And this photograph here, is this what is in your possession with this display box?
Yes, and that belonged to Heinrich Himmler as well. And it's very heavy. It's way more heavy than you could possibly think it is.
Man. Okay, let's go to this next image, and then we'll take a break.
So this image has to be followed up by the ones that show the back of this cross. But these are all of the Holy Roman Empire treasures. And these are the real ones, the ones that are at the Schatzkammer in the Hofburg Museum in Vienna, Austria. So you have the holy swords. You obviously have the holy, what they call the holy apple, the crown. And the crown initially had nothing to do with German kings or anything. The crown is Byzantine, and it was adopted later. And they used, you can see the spear of destiny right, if you're looking at this picture, on the right-hand side of all of the spears and the sabers, you'll see it standing up. That's the spear of destiny. And they used that to give kings their power. So obviously we'll get into the Reichs. The first Reich was the Holy Roman Empire. And then you had the Second Reich, the Third Reich, which was Adolf Hitler. And then there's another one planned. And that's why they want the lance. And I'll explain where that's coming from as well. But if this is a close-up of the Reichskreuz, the Reichskreuz is the Holy Cross, basically, and it's the Holy Roman Empire treasures. This is the cross, the Reichskreuz. And you got to remember, the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman; it was all German.
And this is where this is what holds the Spear of Destiny.
So for a time during World War II, it was missing. But if you take a look at the back of it,
right,
that's it, unopened. It still doesn't look like there's anything strange going on. But those are little compartments. And that's what it looks like with all the compartments in, completely opened. And you see in the center of that, you see a spot where they actually had the Spear of Destiny. That's where they hid it for a while during the war. That's where it was kept. And
what was the other two compartments?
Tell you the truth, I'm not sure. And I asked the same question before, and I couldn't get an answer, because even in Vienna, the people at the museum said that they weren't sure what was actually held in there. Now, if you look at the size of them in comparison to the lance itself, it couldn't have been any of the other Holy Roman Empire treasures. So it had to have been something small, and it could have just been, like, as stupid as this might sound, it could have just been a bit of a bone from a saint or something like that. Because the reason they had the Spear of Destiny from Vienna in the top portion of it is because they thought it had bits of metal from the actual lance that pierced Jesus, hence Jesus's blood on it. So we're dealing with things that are used to sanctify the cross. So anything that had religious significance belonging to a saint, a holy person, or anything like that, that could have been it. And of course, there were tons of charlatans going on with, pieces of the real, true cross. But they were just pieces of wood that people pulled from different places to make money. But the church did have a lineage of certain pieces. And of course, none of them date to the 1st century, but they had a lineage. So it could have been something like that they gave up after time. I have really no idea what they had in those, though.
So we're going to get into the analysis, but the $1 million question is, the Himmler version of the Spear of Destiny, which is now in your possession, may contain the original metal from the lance that pierced Jesus and had his blood on it.
Yes.
Are those same pieces of metal, 1st century Roman lance metal that pierced Jesus with his blood on it, is still with the Spear of Destiny that is in your possession?
Yes. But you got to keep this in mind, though. There's no way to know for sure where it came from.
Right.
We know it's 1st century because it was tested. But I could take bits of that, like the lance that I showed you, that's actually from the 1st century. If I wanted to, I could buy another one of those that's not in good shape and just break off little bits of it and stick it in any lance and say, you know what, test it. It's 1st century. It doesn't mean it pierced the side of Jesus. The only thing I'm saying is Heinrich Himmler and Adolf Hitler thought it did. Wow. And so did the people who had the lance in Vienna. And they still have the lance there, but Heinrich Himmler just switched the metal out.
Do you look over your shoulder a lot?
No, because I no longer have it in my possession. I have it in a safe deposit.
If you know what I mean. This is this is pretty extraordinary, and there's quite a few people that would be very interested in this.
Yes. I'm going to write a whole book on the subject. I'm already 200 and whatever it is, 40 pages deep. I just have to finish up 3 chapters in the center of it and finish up the ending. And I'm almost done with the ending anyways.
Somebody just said, do you feel any additional powers? Oh, man.
No.
Pick lottery numbers, Ken. All right. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us. Our guest tonight, Dr. Kenneth Jeremiah. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below. We'll be right back. This is Jimmy Church, and I want to introduce you to LifeWaves X39 Stem Cell Activation Patch, which has totally transformed my health, my sleep, brain, and my eyes. I no longer need reading glasses. X39 is a true breakthrough in regenerative science. Using light, X39's patented age reversal technology is clinically proven to signal the activation of younger stem cells, accelerating the body's natural healing process. X39 promotes restoration and rejuvenation, bringing the life-changing benefits that I've experienced. By naturally elevating a master signaling peptide in the body, X39 boosts vitality, health and wellness, and resets 4,000 genes to a younger, healthier state. It's one patch, once a day, and you can turn back time with X39. Just go to healingworksnow.com. That's works with an X. healingworksnow.com.
Hey everybody, it's Billy Carson, also known as Forbidden Knowledge. I want to talk to you about a very special event coming up July 30th, 2023, the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We're going to honor people who have been contributing to the conscious community for decades. People that you know and love that have helped you get to higher levels of thought and consciousness and awareness. It's going to be a live in-person event, but seats are going to sell out very fast. You want to make sure you're there in person, and guess what? You can help vote for the winners. Voting is available on forbiddenknowledge.com, and the categories are going to be social media influencer, podcast/radio host, TV host, actor, director, producer, entrepreneurs, health and wellness, philanthropists, authors, field researchers, archaeologists, space anomaly hunters, and of course, a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'll be your keynote speaker that night at the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We have celebrity guests performing. We'll have a halftime show where we're actually going to perform music for you. And don't forget about the pre-event mixer, where if you buy a box seat, you'll be in the VIP section, and you also have private access to a VIP mixer with celebrity guests, shake hands, break bread, network, and then walk the red carpet with us and take amazing photos. It's going to be a night to remember. You don't want to forget this. Make sure you hurry up and get your tickets because they're selling out very fast. I want to see you there. Forbidden Conscious Awards 2023.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Yeah, that's right. X39. Right there. The links are over at jimmychurchradio.com, and we've got it up throughout social media too as well. I did a post today. My team did of X39, and go check it out. Our guest tonight, Dr. Ken Jeremiah, and we're talking about his journey to the Spear of Destiny. And I was looking at, Ken, some of the comments, and I found them interesting about how confusing this is. And that's exactly the point. It is confusing. And when you go copies, borrowed, stolen, replaced, and the again, I'm always about provenance, right? And the chain of custody. It's a difficult thing to deal with here. And the original one that was in Vienna may be in possession of the United States government, and it may be at the Fort Benning Museum, which I've heard those rumors. I've also heard the patent rumors. So we'll explain the best that we can all of this tonight, everybody. Two questions. I think they're rather obvious. The first is it legal to have this in your possession?
I don't know,
Yeah. It's a sketchy area, isn't it?
but it won't be a problem.
Okay. And the second one, how did you come upon it?
So if it's okay, can I start at the very beginning with this?
Yes, you may.
So now what I'm going to tell you is false, but this is what shows up in the majority of history textbooks. They talk about the spear of destiny, the lance that pierced the side of Jesus, that has an unbroken chain of custody up until modern day, and it's the one that's in Vienna. Now, we already know that the one in Vienna isn't a real Holy Roman Empire lance. It's a Carolingian lance. Way too late for 1st century. So that can't be true. But here's the story you'll see in textbooks. Supposedly, a saint called Saint Longinus pierced the side of Jesus with the lance. But I'm a linguist. Longinus was never a name. Longinus meant spearman. So we don't have a name. We have a random soldier who, in the 1st century, pierced the side of Jesus with a lance. Okay. Then it supposedly passed down to Saint Mauritius, Saint Maurice, who headed the Theban legion in the 3rd century, and he died in 287. Then it passed on to Maximianus Hercules, Maximian in English, the emperor, who died in the year 305. Then it went on to Constantine, who died in 337. And Constantine started the First Reich. So the first Holy Roman Empire was Constantine. And that's what you got to remember, it was all German, not Roman and not holy. And obviously, you know how many people Constantine ordered dead. So that was the First Reich. Then the lance supposedly passed to Theodosius. Then supposedly the Visigoth leader Alaric. Then, and this is complete falsehood, supposedly passed to Attila the Hun when he sacked Rome, took all the Holy Roman Empire treasures and a whole bunch of other things. And supposedly, as he was riding out of the city, threw the lance at some soldier, and it ended up back in the possession of the Romans. And then you had it going to Justinian, and then Charles Martel, who died in 741. And then it went to his grandson, Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, who started the Carolingian Empire. And the lance that's in Vienna, this is now, if you think of it, about 750 years after Jesus died. The lance that is in Vienna was created during this time period, during the Carolingian Empire, which obviously lasted with, more than just Charlemagne. It continued for centuries after that. But we know that the lance there came from this Carolingian Empire, started by Charlemagne or Charles the Great. Then it passed to, there's some missing years in here. It passed to Frederick Barbarossa, then Frederick II. Napoleon, in some texts, is said to have had it. He never did. That's complete falsehood. And that's at that time, and we're now dealing with 1700s. It was moved from Nuremberg back to Vienna. And then eventually you had Himmler had it, then Hitler, then back to Himmler, and the rest is history. At the end of World War II, when things started going wrong, Heinrich Himmler, who obviously killed himself by popping a cyanide tablet after he was captured by U.S. soldiers, he had ordered his SS troop to destroy the copies of the Viennese Holy Roman Empire treasures. And they threw everything into Lake Zell. So according to other history textbooks now, even the Spear of Destiny was tossed into Lake Zell. What really happened, one of the SS guys took that lance, smuggled it out of Berlin and into Munich. And it was sold in 1954 for quite a bit of money. It went to France, then England, then California, then Montana, and now it's in Massachusetts.
Was there anything ever found at the bottom of the lake? I know that they dredged it and looked and looked and looked. I'm a little confused about that too as well. If they would have found something, I'm sure it would have been kept on the down low. The replicas that are in Fort Benning, is that the stuff from the lake?
No, definitely isn't, because we have pictures of those copies. It definitely was not the same.
Right. And so what's in Fort Benning?
We don't know. That, like, they're literally saying they never had any copies there. It just doesn't make sense. The whole thing doesn't make sense. It would be so easy if we could just see them, and obviously we wouldn't even have to make tests on it, because once you see it, I know already what it would look like. That we blatantly know that they're copies, and probably not even good copies. I just want to know who created them, what they look like, and where they are, because that would give us a little bit of insight into where it came from. It could have just been created here in the United States sometime after the war by someone who was a fan. Like, if you think of what Himmler did, where he was such a fan, let's say he didn't even know the UnXplained was going to happen. He was just such a fan of this that he had a copy made. Let's say Patton did the same thing, that he was so obsessed with the spear itself that he had a copy made, since he probably didn't think he would have access to the original ever. You could have someone who was just obsessed with this stuff and just have a copy made for themselves. And we don't know, since the army they're not being helpful. In Fort Benning, the museum, there's claims that they have nothing, no records with this. And of course, I'll send you this later if you want. The records that Ken Alford dug up state just the opposite. And it's from the Department of War. The Provost Marshal, I'm looking at another document right here. The War Department Office of the Provost Marshal General. And again, investigation of alleged grand larceny by Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Hensel. And if Hensel was still alive, I'd have some questions for him, because the truth is, he didn't steal this. He didn't steal it from Austria. And I'm guessing, too, he didn't steal it from Nazis. I don't know who made this and anything about it. The only thing I do know, we had an extra copy, and that can't be explained. And I don't think I'll ever be able to explain it, although I'd love to.
Now, I know we briefly touched upon this earlier, but for more clarification for myself, Himmler has this copy made and deliberately had it new, right?
Yeah. Now, here's the interesting thing. Obviously, everyone in Europe knew before World War II. They all knew what the spear looked like, because there were photographs of it, and it was on display at all of the major ceremonies. Any religious ceremony or any ceremony whatsoever at the Schatzkammer at the Hofburg Museum in Vienna, they would have that on display with the rest of the Holy Roman Empire treasures. So everyone in Europe, from late 1800s up until World War II and after, everyone knew what the thing looked like. So it wouldn't take too much time for him to just, all right, I want that thing duplicated. And even in the 1800s, that thing was on display in Vienna. You could go into the museum and take a look at it. And there are images of soldiers during World War II, U.S. soldiers and Nazi soldiers handling the thing. But before that, people were in the museum looking at it. Trevor Ravencroft, although it's not true, talked about how when Hitler was a little boy, he would go to the museum and stare at it. And he was obsessed with it as well. And he did mention it in Mein Kampf, but he didn't go into real detail with it. And Trevor Ravenscroft, he wrote a book called The Spear of Destiny. A lot of the so-called facts he gathered from mediums, so contacting dead people. So if you read that, you gotta really second guess everything that's in that entire text.
Yeah, and here's the other weird thing. I mean, if I'm Himmler, I'm just going out on. I'm going to show you a guitar in just a second to show you my point. But if I'm Himmler, dude, if I'm going to make a knockoff, right? Yeah. I'm going to make a knockoff. Why would you have it look new? And let me show you something. This is a knockoff of Eddie Van Halen's guitar.
Mhm.
All right. Pretty friggin' cool, isn't it?
It is. It's awesome.
All the way down to the worn wood, right? Now, I could have the brand new version of this guitar. That's not as cool. You want it to look like, right? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Why would Himmler have there's a reason behind it. And maybe I guess you don't want people to know.
Well, I have a theory.
Yeah, you have it obviously looking not like the real thing to throw people off the scent. Let's say I had Eddie's real guitar, right? And I had a real one and it was a brand new version of it. That wouldn't feel right. I couldn't convince anybody that that's really Eddie's guitar, right? Because it's brand new. He never played that. But if you have an aged version of it, like something like this, and I have a few, it's called, oddly enough, it's called a relic. But why didn't Himmler just take it the next step and drop it down some stairs or drag it behind a car for a few blocks, and kind of rough it up a little bit?
Because so you have the Aachen copy, right? So people were already making copies of these important Holy Roman Empire treasures. If you age, no joke, I'd be able to tell the difference only because I've spent so many years now researching this phenomenon. But if I didn't know what I was looking at, and you showed me the Aachen copy and the Viennese copy and did, like the old card trick where you're moving one, and I bet you most people would look at that and not know which one was the Viennese copy, the one that supposedly really contained the bits of metal that pierced the side of Jesus. But if you're looking, so the making of the copies is a real thing. And if you think of the old Christian, by old, I mean the old practice that some Christian monks, Buddhist monks, and Hindu practitioners used, where they would transcribe the holy text as like a tribute to the holy individuals who wrote the text.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole idea of copying had another religious significance. If Heinrich Himmler, we know who made his lance, and I forgot the guy's name. He was a Jewish guy. And this was 5 years before the Anklass, so it wasn't, someone being forced to do it before that. But if he really wanted it to pass as the one in Vienna, he would have had it aged. But people looking at that now, who don't know enough about history to know that's not a first century Roman lance, they don't know there's bits of metal inside that. No one would look, if you gave me all three of those and I didn't know what I know now.
Right.
I wouldn't even pick the Viennese. The one that looks the oldest to me is the one in Aachen.
Yeah, it does. It does. It's got a different vibe to it, especially the tip. And what we're talking, just to show everybody real briefly what we're talking about here. This is the copy on the left. Vienna's in the middle, and Heinrich Himmler's is on the right here. And so looking at this, I would say that the knockoff, this one, is
looks like the oldest one. Yeah.
It just looks more authentic to me.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about the bits of metal, what's on the inside. How big are these bits of metal?
They're small.
When you say small, are they slivers?
They're more like if you took the Roman lance, the image you brought up first, and if I just took like a little hammer to the edge, and you wouldn't even have to do this too hard because it's fragile, but you just tap it, you'll get little bits popping off, like little pebbles, that kind of thing. But obviously they're flat because it's steel. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. So
that's what they look like.
Let's pull this up here so we can look at the components. This is a very old drawing. What's the time period from this analysis?
Oh, I don't remember. And I don't even remember what book this came from. But what this is showing how the lance is actually put together. So if you take a look at the one on the left, the whole lance, that's what a Carolingian lance would actually look like. So the one in Vienna the one in Aachen, and Heinrich Himmler's copy, they're all modeled after Carolingian lances. But when they were inserting the nail, which you see it says like 1C on the bottom.
Yep.
We were inserting that, they accidentally snapped it in half. And that's where the iron wrappings on the top, if you look at the third thing in from the left, the iron wrappings are to hold the nail itself in place. But the sleeves, the 3 sleeves that are in the center of it, are to hold the lance together, because it's actually in 2 pieces.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they only show on the left-hand side 2 of them, but the first one is iron, the middle one is silver, and the outer one is gold.
And here they only show the silver and gold. They don't have the iron layer.
And it could be because they left one on the lance, where you see that I or 1 or whatever it is. I think it's supposed to be a 1, but it looks like an I the way they have it there. Maybe it's because that's supposed to just be the iron one, but I don't think so, because it looks like you have an inscription on the outside. So maybe they're, for whatever reason, they're only showing 2 of them. There is an iron sleeve underneath it, though, in Vienna.
Man, it's just so fascinating. Okay. Here it is without sleeves. Now, this is Vienna.
Yes, that should be the Viennese one. Yes, that is.
And it's broken. The nail is broken right here.
Not the nail. The lance itself was snapped in half.
Okay.
So this thing that looks like a nail, it doesn't extend throughout the entire thing in this. What you see on the bottom of it, if you go back to that original later, you don't have to do it now, but if you go back to it later, you'll see that they extended it. So if you can zoom in on that, the one in the middle, you see how there's nothing as far as a nail goes that extends to the bottom.
Right.
What they did, they just extended this thing that's holding it in place. Oh, you can't see where I'm pointing. I'm stupid here.
I do that all the time.
No, they just extended this thing up a little bit against the golden, whatever you want to call it, the golden sheath, just for aesthetic purposes, I believe. But the nail itself doesn't go through the entire lance. The nail itself is like a normal nail size. That's not what they look like. It's symbolic of the actual nails. And speaking of stupid, I just reopened something. I was told the other day, I'm in Hilo, Hawaii, or just outside of Hilo anyways. And I was told there's this like pillar in the water. I was told there's a local legend that if you swim around it 3 times, something will happen. I was like, well, what will happen? Is it good or bad? And they said, we don't know. No one's ever tried it before. So I did it, and it was low tide. And I'm fighting the waves, going around it 3 times, and ripped myself apart on barnacles. And I got cuts all over myself, and I just reopened the one in my hand. That's stupidity for you.
Always listen to the local legends, man. What are you doing? Okay, let's go to this next image here. And I'm starting to become kind of the expert here. Hold on for a second. It's got to right. Here we go. And this is the knockoff.
Mm-hmm. And the way you can tell, if you just look at the top of it, there's a space between the nail and the rest of it. The one in Vienna doesn't have a space.
That right here?
If you go down just a little bit lower. See those 2 windows? They actually call them windows. Oh, keep going further up. Right there, you see a space?
Uh-huh.
On both sides of the nail. You see what I'm talking about?
I do.
So that space on both sides of the nail, you don't see in the Viennese lens. That's the Himmler copy.
And I'm assuming you took this picture.
Yes. That stand used to belong to Heinrich Himmler as well. He kept it on his desk during World War II.
No spaces.
Right, but that's Himmler's copy. The
Right.
one in Vienna, there's no spaces either.
Right. Have you taken this apart?
We have, yep.
And
There are bits of metal, but that doesn't mean anything. Like I said, I could, if I wanted to, I could take one of these copies, or I could have another copy made myself by someone who knows what they're doing, take bits of metal from an actual Roman lance from the 1st century and put them in there. I don't think it ever pierced the side of the bits of metal. I don't think it's from a lance that actually pierced the side of Jesus, but Himmler did and Hitler did.
right.
And so did, like, obviously, the lance itself didn't exist before the Count in Vienna, didn't exist before the Carolingian Empire. So it didn't exist before the year 742, and it didn't exist before Charles the Great, Charlemagne. What I keep wondering is, at what point did the original lance that they thought pierced the side of Jesus, the one that would have looked like the Roman lance, the 1st century Roman lance I showed you earlier, at what point did that either go missing, or at what point did that thing just start deteriorating so much that they took bits of metal from it and created a Carolingian lance, obviously in the 8th century, to house it? And we'll never have that information. We have old texts, like really old texts, with pictures of kings holding it. But when I say old text, we're talking, something that's maybe 1200s. So that's 1,200 years later. We can't call that a historical Christian text. And that's why it shouldn't anger me. But sometimes when I'm talking to people about different religions, and it happens all the time for whatever reason in Christianity and in Buddhism, and I'm personally Buddhist, but I grew up Catholic Christian, so I'm well versed in both faiths. I always find it weird when people say, no, I read this in a real historical text, and I look at it, and in some cases, the historical text is, let's say, from the year 700, or from the first council, the church's first council, which I believe was 836 or 863, something like that. But I'm like, all right, if you think this is real historical evidence of what Jesus did when he was alive, then you would have no problem with me talking about something that happened 800 years ago. Basically, if you think of it, 750 years before I was alive, and you'd say that was a reliable historical source? I don't think so.
No, you're much closer to the reliable source in a safer way than they were.
Right.
I mean, there's no documentation. It's all oral tradition at that point. It's not like there are Greek or documents or some kind of bill of sale. There isn't anything to do that with. Can I ask you, how are these bits displayed or held in place?
They're not. So when you pull that nail out, they move around. They were literally dropped in there, and then the nail was put in place to like sandwich it in the center.
Really?
Yeah.
So it could be anything.
Right. That's what I'm literally, when I say I wouldn't do it with my own because I like that 1st century Roman lance, but I could probably go out and buy one that's in poor shape, but did get dated to the 1st century. And I could buy one for maybe $300. Like, anyone can go out and buy one that's in, the one I have is in great shape. That's why I wouldn't damage that. But let's say if I were a con artist and I actually wanted to do this, I'd hire someone, pay someone a few $1,000s to create a duplica, make it look like the one in Vienna, and then buy a 1st century Roman lance for $300, break off bits of metal, put it in there, and then pass this off as something real. But Heinrich Himmler didn't do that. He didn't care about making people think it's real, which blows apart that theory that he replaced the one in Vienna with his own, and he has the real one. So that theory is out of the picture. And there's no evidence whatsoever that Patton actually had one. We do know that he loved it and he was incensed with it. Or that's probably the wrong word. He was obsessed with it. That's probably a better word. And we now have, information, real information, that there was a set of copies in Georgia in the United States, but from the descriptions, and it looked like it was a real legal investigation that the Army carried out. We know those weren't real either. So that it rips apart the U.S. being involved with some sort of a cover-up theory as well. All we know is the oldest one in existence is it's so much simpler. Like the way we get here is really complex and it gets convoluted, but it's really simple. The one in Vienna is the oldest lance we know of, but it's not a first century Roman lance. It's Carolingian lance. The next oldest one is the copy in Aachen. And then the only other copy that we have on display anywhere is the one that's now in the United States that used to belong to Heinrich Himmler and before him, Adolf Hitler. The Roman Catholic Church has half of a lance. And that one is in St. Peter's Cathedral, and it's actually in one of the support beams, one of the columns as you walk in. And the other part of that is in France. But if you take a look at that lance, and you can find pictures of this, half of it anyways, if you just take a look at those pictures online, we're not dealing with a Carolingian lance. So, and we know where it came from too. And we know why half of it is in France. It had to do with the church maintaining its power and sharing its power with the leaders of France at the time. That's a no-brainer. It has nothing to do with the real lance that pierced the side of Jesus. And then we have another copy. Where is it? I think it's in Armenia, but it's not even a lance. So if you type in Armenian Holy Lance or something like Armenian Holy Lance or Spear of Destiny Armenia, what you'll see is a flag finial. It's the thing that goes on top of a flag post. It's not a lance at all. It's not a spear. It's not a lance. It's a flag finial.
Yeah, I've seen that. I'll tell you something cool, unrelated though. In the Armenian Cathedral in Venice, Italy, all right, it's the oldest Christian cathedral in Italy. The Armenian church is extremely old, right? Okay, so there they have on display a gift from Armenia. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. The world's oldest sword.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
It's bronze and it's 8,000 years old. Wow. Now, it's 5,000 years older than the Bronze Age. So,
that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Go and figure that out. Okay, that's just a little side note. Okay, so let's now we've got another set of images here. What are we looking at here, Ken?
I was actually just trying to find something for you. Well, actually, I wanted to find something for your watchers or your listeners. The tests that were done to date the spear and the bits of metal inside. There's a documentary in which the person who did all the tests, I think it initially aired on the History Channel, but if you just type in Spear of Destiny and look for not a full hour-long documentary, it was like a half-hour documentary where they only talked about the testing of it. And I really wish I could find this, but I'll look, and what I'll do is send it to you once I do find it. I was actually just pulling up my text on it. There were two tests that were performed, and one of them was in 2005 and one of them was in 2012. And they were somehow testing the carbon in the metal, which I don't know anything about how to do that, or even if it's accurate. I couldn't say anything about it. But if people want to do their own research just a bit, it won't take you long, and you can just watch it. I bet you can even watch it for free online. Anyway, what we're looking at right here, if you look at it, since we have spaces in the top, this is the copy. So this is the copy that's in Aachen, because they're windows. And there's an old text, Ludeprand of wherever he was from. If you type in Ludeprand, he was a famous historian. And in his text, which he wrote in kind of an old form of Italian, he called them windows. And the Italian word for window is finestra. So le finestre, the windows. The Latin form, I think, was closer to the Spanish, but I don't remember. It's been years since I studied Latin. He used a word that was kind of in between the two. And I have it in my book, but obviously the book won't be published for a few years. I'm still shopping around for publishers. This is going to be huge.
Now, in this, I can't wait for the book. Very excited about that. In this breakdown of the parts, which is also in the previous illustrations, what is 1D and 1E?
So the sides of, I know you can't see where I'm putting my cursor, where your cursor is right now. If you go to the left and you look at the side of the sheaths themselves, those sheaths, they're on both sides, but they're not one piece. So they were put on two different pieces and they were fastened together.
Correct.
Those are the rivet holes on the side. So you have to imagine that they're attached to the whole sleeve itself, but they're on the side of it. Those are the rivets that connect the front of it to the back of it on the lance.
And so, but these are flat.
Yes. So I would never do this, but let's say I wanted to take apart one of the sheaths that's on Heinrich Himmler's lance. I could pull it off the lance itself and then just pop the sides apart. So you have two that were flat. So think of it this way. The metal itself was completely flat. And then they were wrapped around, and both sides wrapped around two different pieces of metal joined together on the sides. So you have the rivets in this flat piece of metal before it's bent around the lance.
Man, this is just fascinating. Next shot. Now, so here, there's the cross, right? There's the crown. I don't see the apple here. Where's the apple? Oh, there it is.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. And those are obviously who's this? I'm trying to see.
To tell you the truth, I'm not sure where that is, but I have that information. And obviously I can get it to you later. I'm in Hawaii for the next month or so. When I get back to Massachusetts, I could send you this stuff. But there's a whole bunch of books on the theft of Nazi treasures and the pursuit of Nazi treasures by U.S. servicemen. And this might have been the first time that they got this back from the Nazi horde. And then this is before they returned it to Vienna. And that's my guess. And there's a good book on the subject called Hitler's Holy Relics. Ken Alford books, although they're controversial, he did some serious research. They're all academic books, but The Spoils of World War II, and he had like two other ones that were great books. And there's another one too that was made into a movie starring Brad Pitt and George Clooney.
Yeah, what was that called? Oh.
I forgot. But there's a book, the real book on the real incident. The movie itself, I wasn't a huge fan of, but I'm a historian and I like things that really are true to, what happened. So that is like a more mainstream book on looking for Nazi treasures, but that still won't give you the kind of information I think some of your viewers and listeners would want.
Yeah,
but
it's called
tons of
Monument Men.
Yes, that is it. Yes.
You know what's interesting about this photograph, though? You didn't even mention this. They also found Michael Jackson's glove.
Which tells you he's way older than he thought he was.
I just thought I'd throw that in there just in case nobody caught that. But there it is right there. Yeah, Monument Men. I liked Monument Men.
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
If you're looking for real info, though, there's so many books out there on, looking for Holy Roman Empire treasures and looking for Nazi, stolen artwork and that kind of thing. There's even there's a book called The Hitler's Art Thief, which is a good one, but it focuses more on like missing paintings and those kind of things that they took from others.
Now, you avoided answering, so I'll ask again. How did you come to possess the Spear of Destiny?
I bought it.
How does something like that go up for sale? I mean, we all want to know.
It definitely isn't an auction house.
It couldn't have been cheap, number one, but two, it's almost like a movie, and in fact, this is an excellent movie, and I'm sure Hollywood would be very interested in making it. That's not advertised on Craigslist,
Of course.
right? All right. So how does one find out about something like this popping up for sale?
So one of the biggest art heists that ever happened in the entire world, minus what the Nazis did all over Europe, was in New York City. Oh, no, I'm sorry, in Boston. It was in Boston during the St. Patrick's Day parade.
Yeah,
and one museum was basically cleared out of millions of dollars worth of really famous painting. And most of them never surfaced again. Some of them they ended up finding because they figured out who actually stole them. But the ones that were already sold, they've never surfaced again.
Gone.
Yes. In World War II, paintings and artwork that was stolen by Goering, Hess, Hitler, and there was another guy who was fascinated with artwork, and his name's escaping me. Himmler was a religious item fanatic, but others wanted the artwork. And we're still missing tons of pieces, including the Ghent altarpiece. And that supposedly contained a map, which would tell you where the Ark of the Covenant was. And that's a whole, you could have me on it for a different time talking about what the Ark of the Covenant really was. But that's missing. It's never been found. And if you think of this, there's no way it's destroyed. Someone owns that. That's in someone's house. And I've seen homes that have full walk-in vaults downstairs with items I couldn't possibly imagine even owning. Like, they just don't exist. And let's say right now, like, I'll give you a for instance, and I'm going to preface this by saying I am not a Nazi or a neo-Nazi, but I inherited a flag and 2 medals that were Nazi. Now, you can't sell those anywhere. They're illegal in Germany, which means because they're illegal in Germany, most of Europe, you can't sell it. You can't go online with auction houses and sell it. And almost anything you try to post online, they'll take it down because they don't want, anything to do with the swastika or anything like that. And all the medals had swastikas on them. And I had a huge, I still have it now, but it's a huge Nazi flag that, if you read the top of it, was from Berlin. And supposedly it belonged where Hitler was, like near his bunker. And I wanted to get rid of it. I didn't want it in my house. I have a lot of spiritual items from Buddhism, mostly Buddhist stuff in my house, and hundreds of books because I'm a weirdo. But I didn't want that near my spiritual Buddhist items.
No, not at all.
I grabbed one of my friends who sells a whole bunch of stuff like that, and I said, "Do me a favor, just sell it to whoever you can, and give me the money." And he's like, "Yep, no problem." And then I got a phone call. He still has it right now. I got a phone call maybe a week later, and he said, "I'm gonna sell the medals, but the flag is fake." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And at my house, he actually brought out some weird light that I'd never seen before. And he's looking at things. He's like, "I don't know about this one." And he said, "The Nazis never stitched like this." He said, "They stitched in straight lines at the base of the flag." And he said, "These are crossed." Like, they never did that. So this one's fake. And it looks, if you look at this thing, like, I'm not an expert in that kind of stuff, I would say it was real.
Right.
It looks real. It looks that old, everything about it. And he's like, "No, it's not real. I'll give it back to you next week." He said it's only worth about $30, and that's just because of the material it's made out of.
And in the, I'll tell you a funny story about this. This would have been in the late 80s. I get a really nice black leather jacket, and I wanted to throw some medals on it, and just you know how it was. You dressed up the metal jacket. So I go to a military surplus store here in Southern California, the biggest one. And I went in and I told the guy what I wanted. I want some, MacArthur stars, whatever, I just want some cool stuff to put on. I said, hey, do you have, a Russian star? That would look cool. He goes, I have a real one. Yeah, I do. And about that, and then he looks at me and he goes, no Nazi stuff. He just looked right at us. I wasn't even going there. But it was just so funny how he looked at me, man, and he was serious. And so, he's probably a war vet, a military vet and things. But it was really funny how he looked at me. The next question I'm going to answer for, it was just really funny. No Nazi. Funny, but I did get the Russian star.
Oh, that's awesome. Nice.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I wore that with pride. I have no idea where that jacket is today. That was 40 years ago, but it was just so funny. And I think I asked him, Ken. I said, "Why?" He goes, no, it's not legal. I think that's what he told me. That was 40 years ago, but that's what my memory. What my memory says. So would the Spear of Destiny fall under that category if it's a Himmler produced knockoff?
I think so. But although I think in the United States it's not illegal to actually sell Nazi things, I think most auction houses simply don't do it because countries in Europe prohibit it. There was some time ago, I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 years ago, though, an engraved watch that used to belong to Adolf Hitler was sold from a auction house. I think it was in Georgia, actually, for millions of dollars. Or it was like $1,200,000, something ridiculous. And of course, the seller's name wasn't ever, the buyer's name wasn't ever released, and the person who sold it to or gave it to the auction house to auction it, that wasn't ever released either. So everyone remained anonymous with this one. Obviously, the seller and the auction house itself made out pretty well, whatever that amount was. And if you just type in engraved Hitler's watch sells for at auction, the name of the auction house, which I don't remember, and the amount will definitely come up. Someone had mentioned it to me, and I checked it out, and I just couldn't believe. I thought you couldn't sell that kind of thing at all in the U.S.
So what's next? We've done, the big reveal here today on the show, and we know that Himmler's knockoff, I'm just going to call it a knockoff, his copy of the Spear of Destiny is here in the United States, and you have it. What's next? Is that you're going to have people asking you about it now, now that it's public.
So what's going to happen after this? I'm going to finish that book. I'm going to shop around for a publisher. My previous, publishers are, for the most part, academic publishers. That's not the kind of, audience that I want for this book. So even my agent, she deals with more academic work, and she handles the television things and the podcast thing. Well, some of the podcast things. She didn't handle this one, but that book's going to come out. There's an article coming out soon by Ancient Origins that I wrote. That's going to come out, I think, on the 22nd of this month. There's another article that's going to be coming out that I have to actually finish soon. But outside of the things I'm doing with it, and I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen. But you have to remember, this lance was symbolic of the German kings. It's the thing that at one point the Pope used to give power to the German kings, and then they carried the lance. The German kings always carried the lance until they introduced the Byzantine crown, and then it went into it went on display. But you have the First Reich. The First Holy Roman Empire, the First Reich was Constantine. Then you have the Second Reich, which was Bismarck. So Bismarck started that. And where am I here? I was actually just looking for the date of Bismarck, late 1800s, but do I have it even here? No, I don't. But after Bismarck, your Third Reich was obviously Hitler, which started the Third Holy Roman Empire, which is, again, neither holy nor Roman. It was always German, First Reich, Second Reich, Third Reich. And there is a Fourth Reich planned. Whether people know it or not, there was what's called the Rat Lines. And the Holy Roman Empire Church in Italy, in the Vatican, in conjunction with the Red Cross, which was creating passports for people to leave the country, because especially with the Jewish populations, the Nazis took all their IDs. They no longer were considered people. Their passports were gone. So the Red Cross was issuing emergency passports so they could leave the country. A bishop in Milan, with the approval of the Pope, allowed them to make fake passports for war criminals. And that's why Joseph Mengele died of natural causes in, I think it was Belize, on a beach in Belize, but he lived in Argentina. In Argentina today, there are huge German areas where only German is spoken, and there's documentaries on this. It's in different books. It's in regular movies as well that are based on, the documentaries and based on true stories. But a Fourth Reich, a Fourth Holy Roman Empire, was supposed to start from South America. And here's an interesting thing. Most people think, when they think of Hitler and Himmler and all of the big names, that was it. They're done. They had children. Hitler's children had children of her own. And Himmler's kids, Himmler's daughter, and I think it was Himmler. I might be wrong. Some of the war criminals, they had children, and some of them, and there's a whole book on this called Children of Nazis, and it's worthwhile. And in that book, Children of Nazis, they talk about how some of these descendants of Nazi war criminals are actually going to skinhead meetings. And it reminds me, in World War II, you had three major divisions within the Nazis. You had the SD, the SA, and the SS. And when you're dealing with the SA, those were the thugs on the street, where you had Rom and all those guys. They were just the thugs that were starting violence, and they were used just to incite people. And then the SS came in, and they were the ones in charge. And it's almost like they're kind of doing the same thing, where they're making contacts with neo-Nazi, skinheads. And those might be the on the ground soldiers that eventually the Nazis themselves won't care about. Like, they're going to help us start the movement. They're going to do what we want them to do, and then we don't care about them. And
would they be
the night of the, if you don't mind, the night of the long knives? Think of what the SS did. The night of the long knives, they went through their Nazi, the SA, and killed them all. They killed everyone who was in charge of every division, and then absorbed the rest. Like, they got rid of the real people in charge of the SA. And the same thing could happen.
Wouldn't they be interested in the Spear of Destiny, the Himmler version?
So this item is supposed to be the key to the resurgence.
Yeah. Wow,
this is supposed to be the key to it.
That's crazy town. Everybody, don't send me email about this. I'm just the show host. But yeah, it's such and again, when you follow this back and you chase it back, it is just absolutely fascinating and so interesting. I want to thank you for the conversation tonight and the big reveal. I'm just very curious about the future of this item and what's going to happen next. Absolutely fascinating. When the book comes out, we'll have you back on the show, and I look forward to the next conversation. Thank you so much, Ken.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Have a great time out there in Hawaii. Behave and be well.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Kenneth Jeremiah. So there you go. The Spear of Destiny. What a great presentation tonight. And I, over the years, I watched the documentary, by the way, that he referred to earlier. I've seen a few documentaries on it. And I've tried to do my own deep dive into it, trying to figure out actually what's going on. And I found out what his research has revealed, which is there are many copies of it. And what is sitting in the museum in Vienna now, is the real one here in the United States? Did they get a knockoff? Is there a knockoff of the knockoff? Don't know. All of this is fascinating. What a great conversation tonight. Thank you so much, Ken. And Ken's website links are below, and kenjeremiah.com. And there you go. What a great show tonight. I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us. And tomorrow night, I am doing artificial intelligence. All of that is going down tomorrow night. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you to Dennis and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboys, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2023 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. Until tomorrow night, artificial intelligence. I want you to be safe. Go Backley Tappy.